Okay, so remember when we talked about IR signals, we said there were three characteristics of them. The first one we just considered, that was wave number, right? So the bond strength and the mass of the atoms affects where the wave number, where the signal is with respect to its wave number. The second thing we're going to consider is the intensity. So this is super interesting and I think super simple. You're going to like it. So the strength of the intensity can vary, of course, all right? So, and when we say strength, we mean something, if it's really deep, it's a strong signal, and if it's not so deep, it's weaker, okay? This is going to sit very nicely in your head when you hear what's coming. So before we do that, let's build a little groundwork. So it turns out that bonds have an electrical dipole moment, right? And the dipole moment is greater for more polar bonds. So if you have a carbon-oxygen double bond, then you've got some oscillation in the dipole moment, right, which is greater than the oscillation if you have a nonpolar bond, right? And so polar bonds are going to have a greater intensity than nonpolar bonds. And that's exactly what we see here, right? So here's a carbon-oxygen double bond. Here's a carbon-oxygen double bond and a carbon-carbon double bond, right? And clearly the carbon-oxygen with an electronegative element is going to be much more polar, right, than this, which is nonpolar, right? So the first thing that affects the intensity is the polarity of the bonds. And let's point out one more thing about that. Here's with the polarity. If a bond is absolutely symmetrical, then there's not going to be any signal at all. This can be maddening, right? If you have some structure that looks like this, and you're like, oh wow, I'm going to have a carbon-carbon double bond. I'm going to have some signal where carbon-carbon double bonds are. Well, it turns out, since it's not polar, you're not going to have anything, right? Not polar at all, right? Completely symmetric. So the first thing is polarity, and the second thing is how many are there. The stronger signals are observed when you have a bunch of them, okay? And so consequently, even though carbon-hydrogen bonds are not polar, right? We call them like stereotypically nonpolar, right? There's a bunch of them, and since there's a bunch of them, we're going to get a stronger signal.